This morning, Brent crude oil hit $100 a barrel for the first time since the opening weeks of the Iran war. It is the 11th consecutive night of U.S. military strikes on Iran. Gas prices in the United States are holding above $4 a gallon. The House of Representatives passed a war powers resolution to end the conflict, 214 to 208, with 4 Republicans voting with Democrats, and the Senate has passed its own version, which the president has not signed. U.S. officials told CBS News the true cost of the war is closer to $50 billion, roughly double the Pentagon's public estimate. And Iraq is now holding its own talks with Tehran as Trump weighs whether to expand the offensive. Andrew and Tristan Tate, the social media influencers who built a global following around hypermasculine ideology and whose arrest was covered on social media by more people than cover most wars, were arrested by U.S. marshals in Miami on Saturday and are now in federal custody fighting extradition to the United Kingdom. On 38 new charges of rape and sex trafficking. And Venezuela has nearly 5,000 confirmed earthquake dead, 50,000 estimated missing, and a Secretary of State who, per more than a dozen U.S. officials on the record with Reuters, effectively controls the country's finances, natural resources, and telecommunications. And government, while the U.S. holds $8 billion in Venezuelan assets and has sent back $300 million. Let's take all 3. The Iran war's economic price landed on every gas station sign in America this week. Brent crude hit $100 a barrel this morning, confirmed by Fox News Digital's live war coverage, the first time it has touched that level since the opening phase of the conflict. The average price of gasoline in the United States is now above $4 per gallon. A photograph published by Fox News Digital on Tuesday shows a Shell station in Palo Alto, California, with prices visible at the pump. $4 a gallon in California in July. With a midterm election 4 months away, the economic context matters. U.S. officials familiar with internal assessments told CBS News this week that the true cost of the Iran war is closer to $50 billion, roughly double the $29 billion operational cost figure that acting Pentagon Comptroller Jules W. Hurst III gave in congressional testimony in May. The gap between those two numbers is largely explained by munitions that have been used and must be replaced, which don't show up in the near-term operational budget, but which represent real expenditure that will eventually reach the American taxpayer. The Defense Department has now formally asked Congress for $67 billion, $1 billion in supplemental appropriations to address the war's costs. That is an extraordinary number to be requesting for a conflict that was described at its outset as a limited and specific military operation to address Iran's nuclear program. The House of Representatives responded this week in its own way. A war powers resolution passed the House 214 to 208. 4 Republicans voted with Democrats. Representative Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, Representative Warren Davidson of Ohio, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and 1 other. Combined with the Senate's earlier passage of its own version, both chambers have now passed war powers measures, represents an unprecedented congressional expression of opposition to the conflict. It has not stopped the conflict. Trump has not signed or complied with it. And Secretary Hegseth, testifying before the Senate, argued that the 60-day clock under the War Powers Resolution pauses or stops in a ceasefire, a legal interpretation that Democrats immediately contested, with Senators Kaine and Warren saying the 60-day deadline remained in effect. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, speaking ahead of the Senate War Powers vote, put the political reality of this war in the plainest available language. They're against seeing our men and women in uniform get killed and wounded for a war that seems to have no direction or purpose. They're against hearing Trump and Hegseth lie about casualties. And they're definitely against paying over $4 per gallon of gas. That is the political frame Democrats are running into the midterms. And the $100 Brent crude this morning is the single most legible piece of economic evidence supporting it. Fox News Digital's live blog updated this morning carries the headline, Trump weighs broader Iran offensive as Iraq holds talks with Tehran. Iraq, the country whose territory has hosted multiple strikes on U.S. military personnel, and whose government has been caught between its security relationship with the United States and its economic dependency on Iran for decades, is now mediating between the two sides. Iraq's position is one of the most genuinely complicated in the entire conflict. It cannot afford to openly support Iran, and it cannot afford to openly support the U.S. military presence on its soil, and it is now attempting to hold those contradictions together by hosting talks aimed at de-escalation. Whether Iraq's mediation produces a 10-day ceasefire, a broader deal, or nothing at all is unknown. What is confirmed is that the 11th consecutive night of U.S. strikes has not deterred Iran, has not reopened the strait, has pushed oil to $100 a barrel, and has driven enough Republican lawmakers to a bipartisan war powers vote that the White House is publicly arguing about whether the clock has started. Now, Andrew and Tristan Tate, because whatever you think of their ideology or their legal situation, the scale of this story's reach demands that it be told clearly. On Saturday, U.S. Marshals arrested Andrew and Tristan Tate in Miami as they were on their way to attend a bare-knuckle boxing event. The arrest was made on a UK extradition request. British authorities had issued 38 new charges against the brothers, bringing the total number of criminal charges they face in the United Kingdom to 59. Andrew Tate, 39, faces 7 counts of rape, 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation, 3 counts of assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and 19 charges for offenses connected to indecent images of a child and what the Crown Prosecution Service described as extreme pornography. Tristan Tate, 38, faces 1 count of sexual assault, 2 counts of rape, and 3 counts of arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation. The new allegations are claimed to have occurred between July 2010 and August 2017, involving 4 additional alleged victims, bringing the total number of women who have made criminal allegations to UK authorities to 7. On Monday, both brothers appeared handcuffed and shackled at the Clyde Atkins United States Courthouse in Miami for their initial federal appearance. Their attorney, Joseph McBride, immediately announced he would fight the extradition and delivered one of the more revealing lines of any court proceeding in recent memory. Andrew and Tristan Tate will walk free. America does not do Britain's political dirty work. Not here, never. The brothers themselves denied all allegations, as they have consistently done throughout years of legal proceedings in multiple countries. The state of Florida is conducting its own active criminal investigation into the brothers. Romania has separate charges against them of human trafficking and forming an organized criminal group to sexually exploit women. Andrew also faces a civil suit in the United Kingdom from 4 women who have accused him of rape and coercive control, alleging that police and prosecutors failed them for years. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation, which represents one of the accusers, said through its chief legal officer that they were thankful to the United States and United Kingdom authorities for courageously pursuing justice. The critical context here is cultural as much as legal. Andrew Tate, who describes himself as a misogynist, not a provocation, his own word, has built one of the most consequential social media empires of the past decade. His content, which promotes the idea that men should dominate women economically and sexually, that women's primary value is sexual, and that legal and social systems protecting women are instruments of oppression against men, has reached hundreds of millions of young people globally, including a genuinely enormous audience in Asia. His Hustlers University platform has had over 200,000 paying members. His clips have been algorithmically amplified across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram in ways that the platforms have only partially addressed. He has cultivated relationships within the broader MAGA political ecosystem and has been publicly defended by conservative media figures. The charges he now faces in a U.S. federal courthouse are not abstract allegations in a foreign legal system. They involve specific women, specific acts, specific timeframes documented in court filings unsealed on Monday. CNN's reporting on those filings describes women who told British officials they were choked, sometimes to the point of passing out, and raped. These are the alleged experiences of real people, documented in legal proceedings in a country with a robust criminal justice system, over a multi-year period involving police investigations in multiple jurisdictions. The attorneys Britain's political dirty work framing is worth analyzing, because it is not a defense based on the facts of the charges. It is a positioning strategy that frames a sex crimes extradition request as political persecution, the same framing Tate has used consistently for years to convert each legal development against him into evidence of a conspiracy rather than evidence of conduct. Who have been trained to view institutions as corrupt and legal systems as tools of political control receive that framing enthusiastically. It reinforces the ideology that made his content compelling in the first place. The legal proceedings in Miami are also simultaneously a content event for an audience that has been prepared to interpret them in a specific way. Both of those things are true at once. And now, Venezuela, because the numbers this story carries should not be allowed to fade into background noise while the Tate arrest and the oil price dominate the feed. The confirmed dead from Venezuela's June 24 earthquakes, 4,930 as of July 16th. The United Nations estimates as many as 50,000 more people are still missing, not unaccounted for in a bureaucratic sense, but genuinely unlocated. In a country where search and rescue operations were constrained by the scale of damage that the government's own assessment massively undercounted, NASA's Sentinel-1 satellite assessment found 58,870 damaged or destroyed buildings. The Venezuelan government's official count, 855. The gap between those two numbers, 68 times the official figure, is not a rounding error. It is a description of a government either incapable of assessing its own disaster or choosing not to publicly acknowledge its scale. Trucks with coffins have been digging trenches in open fields near La Guaira because formal cemetery infrastructure cannot handle the volume. This was confirmed by Reuters journalists on the ground in late June. It is still happening. Confirmed by Just Security, citing Reuters' Karen Freifeld, based on interviews with more than a dozen U.S. officials. Secretary of State Marco Rubio now effectively controls Venezuela's finances, the distribution of its natural resources, and its government. This came after the U.S. capture of Nicolas Maduro in January, which installed Delcy Rodriguez as acting president. The government that is formally responding to this earthquake, slowly, per local witnesses, is a government that, per multiple U.S. officials, is being administered from Washington. The United States holds approximately $8 billion in Venezuelan assets seized as part of the sanctions and intervention framework. The U.S. has provided $300 million in disaster relief to Venezuela following the earthquakes. $300 million of $8 billion is 3.75%. I am not asserting that the $8 billion should all go to earthquake relief. The assets were seized for specific policy reasons, and their disposition is a separate legal question. I am noting that the arithmetic exists, and that the gap it describes between what the U.S. holds and what it has returned in the form of emergency assistance to a country it has killed 4,930 people's government's emergency response capacity to manage is real, documented, and worth holding in view. Venezuela is not receiving the attention a humanitarian crisis of this scale would normally command. Some of that is attributable to the Iran war, the World Cup, and the Tate arrest competing for the same audience attention simultaneously. Some of it is attributable to the political complexities that make Venezuela an uncomfortable story in both American progressive and conservative media ecosystems. It doesn't fit cleanly into either side's preferred narrative. The deaths are real regardless. 3 stories today. Oil hit $100 a barrel this morning. Gas is above $4 in America. The House passed a war powers resolution the president hasn't signed, and the war whose costs the Pentagon understated by roughly half is entering its 11th consecutive night of strikes as Iraq tries to mediate between Washington and Tehran. Andrew and Tristan Tate are in federal custody in Miami, facing 59 total UK charges, including rape and sex trafficking, with an attorney arguing that extradition is political persecution and an audience of millions who have been prepared to receive exactly that framing. And Venezuela has 930 confirmed earthquake dead, 50,000 people estimated missing, a government administered from Washington per U.S. officials, $8 billion in seized assets, and $300 million in returned aid. These are today's numbers. None of them are going away between now and November. The gas price will be on every pump in America when voters go to the polls. The Tate case will be in the courts for years. The Venezuelan death toll will keep climbing until the rubble is cleared. The question that applies to all three, differently shaped. Who is accountable? To whom? For what?